Hello, we are back on a new platform. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance. We are back with you this week. Thank you so much for giving us the space and time to take a break and be with us here this week. Now, we have a few things to discuss as normal. Um, and I want to just kind of bring in the newness of what we're doing. So same old show, but brand new platform. We are here using a platform that allows us to stream to both YouTube and Facebook. So if you're catching us on our Facebook Live page, wonderful. And then if you're on the YouTube channel, you all will still be able to chime in. We want our community to interact, so we're going to see all these comments as they come in. There is a slight delay. Rin, we see you.
Hi,
Yay!
Ren. It worked.
It's good to know. When new things pop off, you just don't know what will happen, and technology can always get the best of us. So as we encounter whatever happens, your patience is absolutely appreciated. So but leave us those comments, and we'll interact with you as we can. So as always, we're here with you to talk about East meets West, what's been going on across the cosmos, across the country, for our both from both of our metaphysical perspectives. We operate as healers and facilitators for the divine and for the individuals that seek us out. So I am half of this team as Dahlia, and I have my metaphysical shop out in Woodbridge, Virginia, and then we have.
I'm Katrina Rasbold, and my shop is in Shingle Springs, California. It's called Crossroads, and I run and own it with my husband, Eric Rasbold. And I'm so honored to be here with Dahlia. This is just one of my best times of the week, and I want to apologize to everybody out the gate because I did have to miss last week and um, another time because of the fire. And I hate finding out almost at the last minute I'm not going to be able to do it because something essential came up. But I do think we're on the downside of that. I think we're not going to see any more cancellations. So I'm really excited for that. So again, sorry we missed some weeks. Our full intention was always every week, and we continue that. But emergency prevailed this time.
Life happens, and like I said in our post, as a community, that's where the support comes in. So we definitely appreciate you all's support. I see we have Denise in our chat too. I'm loving this live chat thing.
Yes, this is wonderful. Thank you for finding this.
So as far as our weeks go, highs and lows, right? I mean, as a collective in the United States, we had our anniversary of 9/11 not 2 days ago. Prior to that, I there was a lot of things going on planetarily, and so as far as my themes this week, and it seems shared as I was sort of briefly talking to Katrina beforehand, we will be covering grief, which I think we almost always sort of touch on. I experienced loss, and then my partner experienced a loss as well, and we'll go into details on that. And then there were a lot of themes, so that was on a personal level. And then at the store, a lot of folks were coming out asking about spiritual growth and feeling like they're not making progress,
Mhm.
and then other folks were asking, "Am I on the right path?" And so those are seem largely more than weekly themes. I think if you are on the spiritual path and um, in a place of always seeking balance, those questions will come up. So, but this week seemed pretty heavy, and for some reason, like every Libra client that I have was coming in, so Libras were taking a huge hit, and my Libra moon was not happy. So
Oh,
I don't know what was going on out in space, but uh, yeah, it was wild. What
yeah.
about you, Katrina?
You're absolutely right. And as I've mentioned before on this show, we have a lot of people right now who are exceptionally empathic and were not before. They're new baby empaths that became empathic because the herd was threatened, so to speak, by the virus and by political discord and all the things that threaten us right now. And so we have people who are newly empathic rather than those of us who have struggled with it for our whole lives, basically. And so we had this huge slew of people coming in who are just overwhelmed with 9/11 grief
Yeah.
and the energy that's coming forth from all of the tributes and the information and playing the video footage again. And this person was a father and was in the Twin Towers, and this person was somebody's mother and was in the Twin Towers. And so the effects this year, I think, were a lot more profound
Oh, yes.
than they normally were. And people are struggling with, why am I feeling so much grief right now? To me, this is tragic and this is a news report. Why am I feeling this so much?
Yeah.
And so that was a big thing. But I really just think that there's been a lot of grief in general. The 9/11 thing definitely woke up a lot of things, but we've got people who, and we've talked about this before, are dying alone in hospitals because their families can't go to them due to the COVID restrictions. Now, out here, I don't know how it is there, but the Delta variant has gotten bad enough that a lot of county hospitals are not letting people go back with their people who are sick
Oh, wow.
to visit. And so we're back to having people that are dying, and people are dying for non-COVID related reasons in the last couple years more than I've ever seen. It's bizarre how many people are passing. So there's just an overwhelming, pets even. So
Yeah.
many pets. Every time I open Facebook, somebody's pet died.
Yeah. I can speak to noticing the mass amounts of transitions as well, and my news feed, and then, like I said, experiencing loss myself. A friend, fortunately, that I hadn't seen in the last 2 years, and you go through, why didn't I reach out? Why didn't I? All these things.
Mhm.
Um, Passed on very suddenly, and when when you start reaching up for answers, you often get things like, well, you know this is that time of year, as we
Mhm.
enter this time of year. I remember the first time I noticed it was 2016, um, and there was a slew of celebrities that had died
Mhm.
at the end, like going into the fall season, and I was like,
Mhm.
what is this? And now, we've had a year and change of massive amounts of death, and then now we're going into this fall season, and it just seems hyper focused. And so I you know I've noticed it, and if you're out there and you've experienced loss as well, like we definitely see you, and feel you on those levels of grief. And then
Mhm.
with the tributes this year, the 9/11 tributes, it was like I wanted, on the one hand, to acknowledge how well done it was. They acknowledged things that I hadn't even realized back at the original occurrence of it happening. I was in high school when it happened, and so there was new information that I was just like, wow, how could that not have been brought up? And I felt like a lot of the tributes were so well done, bringing new information to light, but there was this like lack of sensitivity
Mhm.
to, we are already in this horrible place that hasn't gotten better in more than a year, and then we've been hit again. So I don't know if you felt that.
Absolutely. And I've long been proponent of what I call the village mentality,
Hmm.
which is, and this has been, oh gosh, I wrote about this in my blog about 20 years ago, that I had stopped watching the news
Hmm.
because I believe that we are still evolutionarily only wired up to process so much threat and negative information at a time.
Yeah.
And when we have a global network, such as the internet, that's able to get us information instantly about horrible things going on in the world, even newspapers and news reports, we're just not meant to process that much tragedy. And of
Right.
course, news reports don't focus on the good things that happen. So it's just one thing after another that's negative.
Yeah.
And now, especially, I think that we're having such profound psychological and sociological and even biochemical reactions to all of the grief, all of the trauma that we're all processing. We're like zombies. We're just
Yeah.
walking around post apocalypse. And so it's so important when that's happening that we find a way to ground ourselves and get back into our bodies.
Yep.
Find those stones like apophyllite and fluorite that are going to give you peace and calm, but lift you up,
Right.
and to create those mitigated circumstances on those feelings.
Yeah, I'd love to throw a patchy tear in there as
Oh,
well,
it's wonderful.
as a not only a grounding tool but a grieving tool.
What we
Um,
used to use Apache Tier for was easing the intensity of rites of passage. So
mm,
that's especially true for now, that as we're
yeah,
growing and as we're learning more about certain aspects of ourselves and what we can and can't tolerate, which is really what a rite of passage is about, that Apache tier is going to be wonderful for that.
yeah, and echoing, what you've said about grounding. I know this week, um, there was for me a point where I realized, wait a minute, I did absolutely no self care. Like this was not that I had that many appointments, but it was just like a heavy lifting kind of
Mhm.
week, and then snapped on Friday, like just basically broke in half.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and then A actually ended up, so another great tool to facilitate sort of this all that's taking place, the heaviness in the heart. I ended up working with cacao, pure 100%
Hmm, hmm.
ceremonial, just pulled off the vine cacao, and putting in some cayenne pepper and a recipe from a friend who used to hold cacao ceremonies at the shop. And it's not a hallucinogenic, so it's just full of magnesium, which is tied right to the heart. And sitting with the warmth of it and being mindful and letting it focus on my heart space while I'm drinking, it was so, one, it was instantaneously grounding, right? It's chocolate. Um, but that opening took place. It felt like I was sitting with the spirit of the plant, just being held and being able to expand
Hmm.
what was happening, which that expansion part is when you widen that space, when you open that space up, everything else can drop. It can, go grounded and fall into the earth and be changed.
It's absolutely right. And it's not a rookie mistake. It's something that everybody does. I've done this for decades, energetic healing, and I'll still have somebody come in and say, "Oh man, you are not in your body. You are not grounded." And I'll realize that I haven't done the things I usually do, that I had prepped for the healing or the energetic transfer as I normally did, but I hadn't done my self-care, as you said. So in fact, this week I had that experience as well.
Mm.
And so it was 11 o'clock at night. I was in bed and I could just really feel, oh, I don't know how to explain it. I could feel trauma retained in my muscle tissues.
Mm.
And so I messaged a friend of mine, one of my former students. She's a senior student and graduated out, and she's a massage therapist. And I said, "Hey, I was just wondering." And she said, "Oh, absolutely." And so she came up and gave me about an hour and a half massage at the shop, and I could really just feel the release that was happening, and it was collective. It was things that I had stored really since before the trauma, before the fire. And so we have to do those self care things, or we're not going to hit baseline and
Yeah,
we're not going to have the healthiest life that we can have.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so, what you pointed out about it not being a rookie mistake, I want to offer, if you're experiencing compassion fatigue this week,
Mm.
you should have zero guilt about that, because it has just been that kind of week, that kind of month, that kind of year. And so, definitely having compassion for yourself first is the best way to move forward before you have compassion for others. And so if you need to have your cave time, take it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. And when you're looking at battlefield mentality, for instance, you get people who become immune to the suffering of others
mm,
for exactly that experience. They've overloaded
yeah,
and they just can't process it anymore. So you stop. You're looking at it, but you're not seeing it because
almost
you
like a
have to be able to walk. You have to be able to function.
almost like a self protection.
Right. Absolutely. It's a shield. And I think a lot of us are doing that. We used to be, we turned on the news and we heard terrible things happening in Saudi Arabia, and we heard terrible things happening in Turkey and Cuba or wherever it happened to be. It was, it's not often that we turn on the news and hear about our neighbors dying.
Yeah,
And so with that village mentality, it's about what can you process, or you can only process what's happening in your village. Just those boundaries of where could you walk in half of a day, and that's what you can manage. And um, we're all way past that.
yeah, yeah. I
So
saw a
far past.
post. I saw a post that said something like, "I think we're a lot more traumatized than we realize," and I wholeheartedly agreed. And just to segue, this is the spiritual growth process. You cannot
Mhm.
have one without the other. I know our community tends to sort of advertise this rising above. And yeah, that happens, but there's you don't outgrow the trauma, you don't outgrow the grief. You just process it on a different level. Like you know, that little string is tied to your ankle, it's going to follow you all the way up,
That's
and
so
you gain
true.
different tools.
That's absolutely true. And rising above, there's different types of rising above, and a lot of
Mhm.
times what people perceive as rising above really means that you're ignoring the trauma
Yep.
and not processing it. And sometimes rising above means getting down in the valley of the shadow and wrestling with that trauma, getting down in the mud with it, and really experiencing all of it so
Mhm.
that you can get up and keep walking. So rising above, I think, is overrated.
Absolutely.
I think you should be gracious and open to lessons that come as the result of trauma, but you should feel your trauma and you should work with it so that it does get processed out of you. So rising above, um, I think that most people who say rising above actually aren't. I think they're ignoring what happened to them.
Absolutely. And not having any expectation for your neighbor looking the same way that you do through that process. So
Yes,
the
that.
shoulds and the shouldn'ts of like, hey, so and so has been sobbing, or hey, I'm sure this person deserves more space than I do to have challenge. Not at all. Not at all. It's all the same frequency, but it won't manifest the same way. It won't look the same. So,
One of the things I'm experiencing right now that is tough is the way people who have survivor's guilt, so to speak, respond to me.
hmm,
And it's kind of a mixed bag. But an example, I was at a thrift store the other day and I saw the minister in Grizzly Flats, who hadn't been the minister for about 6 or 7 years, but he was for a very long time, and his wife, and they had still lived up there. And I knew them very well. And she came up to my cart, and I'd picked up some jigsaw puzzles because I wanted a distraction. Haven't cracked one yet, but I just got some. And she said, "Oh, you're getting puzzles. I love to work puzzles." And I thought she was speaking to me because she knew me. And I said, "Oh, I do too, Sharon. I really love doing that." And she just pulled back and she said, "How did you know my name?" And I started to mess with it. I got to tell you, I was on the edge of pulling the psychic card. But I said, "Sharon, I'm your neighbor. I live down the street from you in Grizzly Flats." And Katrina Raspo, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, it is you." And she starts talking to me and everything. I said, "Did you go back to your house?" And she said, yes, our side of Grizzly Flats opened up again. And so we were able to get up there, and the house didn't even smell like smoke. And I said, well, God was looking out for you for sure. And she said, well, did you get back to your place? And I said, no, we're still closed off. Today was the first day we could go back up. And she said, well, how was your house? And I said, well, it burned to the ground. And right then her husband walked up, who's an elderly guy, and he just looked at me. And when he heard that, they looked at each other. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Okay, we'll see you later. Bye. And off they went, as though we hadn't known each other for 20 years. And I see so many people that are going through trauma, but because their trauma isn't as bad as mine, they won't talk to me about it. Oh,
Yeah.
I've got this. I just don't want to bother you because mine seems so trivial compared to yours. And it's not a game. It's not a race. It's not a process. It's not a contest. And, you don't stop having trauma just because somebody else has more or less trauma. It's
Right.
still trauma.
Right. Right. And if you're, I think we've talked about this actually back on Tea and Crohn's. If you're curious, if you're wondering, like, hey, does this person have the bandwidth? Check in. I think that, this is a lot like what happens. These kind of discussions, these same kind of discussions happen in suicide prevention groups. Do not be afraid to ask somebody what they're going through. You cannot put an idea in somebody's head. If it was there, it was there. And then at least okay, like repeatedly, you've told me you're in a really great place. So I can say, oh, okay, that's awesome. And then, I can even go on to ask you, hey, do you have a second for me to ask you this question? And if you say no, it's not a personal dig. And so I think that, part of our tribe mentality, our community mentality should be pushing more for the possibility. Like, go ahead and put yourself out there. It's not rejection. And at least you'll know, like, if this is your person that you talk to, you'll know where they are. Can they handle what's going on with you? Do they need a bit of time? What needs to happen, instead of like that awkward, like, oh, deer in the headlights. And that's exactly what happened. It's like they were deer, and you shined your car lights on them, and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, that was exactly how they work. And one of the lessons that is very strong for me that we worked on in our shadow class at the shop is the only way to experience true connection with somebody, whether it's a friend or a lover or a parent or a sibling or your child, the only way to experience true connection, the deep soul connection, is to allow yourself to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
And part of being vulnerable is reaching out when it doesn't feel safe, when it is scary, when you might get back more than what you expected because that person is an emotional overload and they need to vent, they need to word vomit onto you, and have somebody hold space for them because nobody else will, because what they're going through is so big. And what I love is that you and I have that kind of connection, so you can trust that when I say, Dahlia, I'm in a really good space right now, even though I just had a tragedy, you can accept that. And you can say, okay, she's in a good place, and not think, oh, she's just saying that because she's martyring, because she's doing this. No, I'm in a good space right now. And another time it might be, I'm can you hold space for me because I'm feeling vulnerable and fragile right now.
Absolutely.
So it's really about having those relationships where you can be vulnerable and not feel as if it is a rejection if that person says, I can't talk right now.
Right. And you can feel like it's not weak to share. Like, you are not in a place of weakness um if you need that space. And literally there is nothing that anybody can use against you that you don't allow.
That's
So,
true. And, it's also, Corby used to call it the paw tap. Do you remember that? She would say it was like a cat when the cat just reaches out to touch and go, hey. And it's just, hey, I'm here. I see you. Are you okay? And I think something Rin is saying is resonating with me, that we don't have the societal tools
yep.
to manage those conversations anymore. I don't know that we ever did, but at the same time, those surface connections are important in society where we're kind to each other, and we're not necessarily drinking 40s on the corner together in the evening, but we're polite and
Yeah,
kind, and so an acquaintance. But we have to have those soul friends
absolutely.
that we can really feel in our hearts and reach out to. And it really is coming back to, I see you.
Yeah.
I really see you, and I know that you see me, and I know that I can be myself right now.
I think that when we had those tools, we were using greetings like that. So, you always hear about different cultures. I was participating in a group. I think I mentioned this last time where this beautiful soul came forward and was talking about something she was watching where that was the greeting was, I see you. And we don't have that anymore. Everything is at arm's length, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable, I don't want to be uncomfortable, all of that. And when I read Rin's comment about societal tools, and it had me reflect on how I have raised my children. So I raised them that when somebody says hello, how are you, at least respond to that. And then if there's discomfort, like if you don't want to talk to them further, you don't have to. But I kind of condition them to say, "Oh, I'm good," or my youngest has decided that he's great. Like he's picked that great word up on his own because he's just that spirited. But usually at around, so what I did with my oldest was at around 5 or 6, I started saying, hey, if you're not okay, say that. But still, to some degree, with even with children, you want them to sort of, you want them to be in a good place. And perhaps in what Ren is saying in the societal tools, we want people to we don't want people to feel bad for us. And so we may even go into saying, oh, I'm okay.
Oh, that's so good. And I'm going to contradict myself real quick because that's what I do. Um, you and
Me too.
I, with the two of us, and other people in, I say in our community as if you live here because it feels like you live here.
I want to live there.
You should live here. We are connected in that way that you can reach out and say, hey, how are you doing today? And I can say, I'm having a tough day, I got to tell you, or I'm in a good place, or whatever it might be. But outside of that, on those surface relationships, we are so often taught to lie or to just say something trite. For instance, when I was in the child development field, we were very careful about how we address the kids.
Oh,
And
okay.
one of the things we had to do was if the kid hurt someone, you took my block, I'm going to hit you with a truck kind of thing, you had to almost force the child to say that they were sorry. And the child would, and the idea was, this is what we do in a cultured society, is if you cause harm, you teach them at an early age to apologize.
Hmm.
And I get that, but at the same time you're teaching that kid to say something that's inauthentic, because
Right. They may
at
not feel
least
bad.
half the time those kids were not sorry they bashed that kid with a truck. And so I had another thing. When I say I'm going to contradict myself, one of the other challenges I've had with this experience, and there's been so many, and it's really sifted out some heavy shit as far as interactions with people that I didn't expect to see coming. But it's really hard to manage the emotional load of the people who are asking me how I'm doing.
Yeah, I was just about to file in right behind you on that one.
Well, go. It really is. I mean, we're on the same page, I'm sure, because, how are you doing? Well, I'm not in a good space right now. I'm really kind of grieving some things that were lost, and they're like, ouch. And they're struggling to find a way to make it better, and I don't
Right.
need that. I
Right.
just need them to be there. And
Right.
I don't
And
need to tell them everything. I just need them to don't wince and don't feel so bad.
right. Brace yourself. No, don't. And for people that I can identify, like, so like I consider myself neurodivergent, and so the first thing that I do to connect with people, I'm sure others do, maybe this isn't a neurodivergent thing, but is to dive into my experience. And that's
Mhm.
often why I don't share, is the presupposition that comes with it. So, I say, oh, I'm not in a good place, and then that person supposes that it must be just the deepest, darkest pit, and it's like, no, I'm up here, but like my not so good of a place is probably somebody's, happiest day ever. So we can't suppose that somebody is, where we would be. And I think, we've kind of already dived into that, but working with energy, that comes forward. So like you're saying, somebody goes ouch, and then they can feel all this stuff rising to the surface, and you're like, wait a minute, I
No.
didn't pull that linchpin, like,
Chokeray, chokeray.
simmer down now.
Yeah. So now I've got to heal them because they're feeling so bad for what happened to me. And that's really tough. It's so much better when somebody is just, wow, that's really awful. I'm so sorry that happened to
or
you.
or it must be, you must feel this way, and it's like, actually, I don't. Let's not bring that into the circle.
Oh, absolutely. And so yeah, it's I think that's one of the biggest challenges is how to manage when somebody asks you that, how much to reveal. Um, it's not as though I wear a t-shirt that says my house burned down so that when everybody comes into my store, hi, welcome to Crossroads, my house burned down. Would you like a candle? I'm not doing so great with fire right now. Would you burn your own candle, please? But at the same time, people are talking about the fire because it's a big thing here
Yeah.
and it's still going. And so you join in the conversation and you're like, yeah, okay, well, my house burned down a couple weeks ago. And they're like, wait, 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 what?
But you seem so,
You seem okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, I've been having conversations and processing, and again, that spiritual growth. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but when I recognized being in a different place, and this is not to say better than anyone or whatever, but what it looked like for me, it almost felt like a personality disorder. Like, wow, how did that switch so fast? Like, I I remember when this used to take months,
Yeah.
and now it's tomorrow, and I'm okay. This should I feel should I feel bad? Do I put myself back in a bad place? Like, how did I move through this so quickly? And then you have, the third day, and you're like, wait, why am I back here? And it just, like, this oscillation and vacillation that happens on a much at a much quicker pace can feel unstable, but the spiritual growth process is learning to move through these things quicker and more efficiently, and which makes space for new stuff to come up that you would have not tackled before. I think it's important to highlight that whatever that pace looks like for you, it's not a race, like Katrina was saying earlier.
Yeah. Well, and even within, like you were saying before, within the same trauma, allowing for different responses that people have. We have a Grizzly Flats board where people are posting information they have about the fire and when we can go up and see our houses and how to manage the water system problems that are happening up there and that sort of thing. And somebody said, if you if you lost everything and you're not devastated and you're not falling apart, then you definitely have not processed your grief. You're not even looking at it. And I thought, wow, how arrogant is that?
That's a pretty high horse you're on there, friend.
Yeah, just because you're falling apart doesn't mean that that's how I'm processing this. And it doesn't mean that mine is healthier than yours or yours is healthier than mine. It's just where I'm at.
Right.
And so I just really think we get judgmental about how people need to be processing things. Now, if I see somebody whose child died of leukemia and they're back to work the next day and taking on a full caseload, then I'm going to probably think that maybe there's some avoidance there. But overall, I think that we need to be just respectful that different people grieve in different ways.
Well, and much like your puzzles, and what we have already said, this is a lot, and to avoid overload, sometimes you need that distraction, that deterrent, until you can revisit. And that's there's a place, I think, of shame when it comes to those sort of things, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I shouldn't be doing this or doing that, or maybe I should just sit with it and work it all out right now. And I honestly don't know anybody that's capable of getting everything in at one time. So
No, no, I don't either. I really don't. And we do have to have those things that we're doing that have nothing to do with our work, nothing to do with our grief, nothing to do with tasks at home. For me, one of my coping strategies was I needed to have a home.
mm,
And what was the most distressing to me when we were living at the shop for those couple of weeks was one of the best things about having a great job and the end of the day comes and then you go home. And I purposely don't have any of my working tools, just my personal altar items at the house so that I don't work at home because I'll if it's there I'll and somebody needs something I'll do it. So if I don't take my tools there I can't do that.
right,
And so it was like
fertile
I
things.
never left work. I would work until 1 or 2 in the morning because I didn't leave work. And we
Mm,
have to have things that are away from what we do and how we identify ourselves just to add that extra layer of life onto us so that we're
yeah.
not just work and tasks and production.
The separation, I didn't realize the importance of that until I met you, and then you were talking about that, and I actually gave it a shot, and I was like, holy crap, like there's a whole life out here that I
There's a
was
whole
missing,
life. Yeah.
you
For me,
know.
that's been since we moved into the new rental unit. It's only 10 minutes away from the shop, whereas
Oh,
I was almost 50 minutes away before. And so we gained at least an hour and a half of time every day. But for some reason, where I'm living now, I go to bed earlier, like around 11 or 12 o'clock. It used to be, 1 or 2. And I get up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and I've got this whole morning before I have to go to work. It's bizarre. So it feels like there's all these hours in the day now, and that
yeah,
helped me to breathe a little bit better because it before it was almost like I got up, made breakfast, went to work, worked all day, came home, checked my emails and went to bed.
yeah.
And so now like you said there's this whole life that I'm able to have.
This is a great segue into our last talking point, which is the question of, am I on the right path? And I sort of hate and simultaneously use the word right and wrong. Um, right is subjective, and I always end up asking folks, like, okay, but you're asking me, are you on the right path? But what do you want? That's how you can tell. And so in this situation, like your example of every all the traumas that you've been through, everything that you've been through, you know, to ask the question, are you on the right path at this stage? What you have delved into, or what do I need in this moment? And like you said, that separation from the shop puts you on the right path for what you need to have the space, to have the time. Is it but in the same sentence, we can't qualify, losing your property as the right or wrong thing. But in this moment, you navigated to an apartment that was right for what you needed right now.
I did. And actually it's a 1,200 square foot little house in the middle of horses. I live on a horse ranch.
Oh,
And it's secluded. There's a gate. Nobody can get in unless I want them to be there. It's very quiet. It's beautiful, and so I'm profoundly happy in this house. Um, I when you're talking right path, or and I get that a lot from people too. They presume that it's a linear path and
oh
that there
yeah.
is a path you're supposed to be on when there are usually there are 7 or 8 possibilities or more. That's an arbitrary number of paths you could be successfully walking right now. We have a manifest destiny, which is where we end up. But if you figure your manifest destiny is, I don't know, pick a spot, Evansville, Indiana, and I'm in California, there are many thousands of ways you can get there, and none is more right than the other.
Right.
As long as you're headed in the right direction, that's all that matters. And the way you know if you're headed in the right direction is how easily are things flowing around you?
Right.
How much resistance are you hitting?
And even as you navigate the resistance and the flow, what is your personality type? Like if you're easily bored, maybe challenge is good for you. And so go ahead and take the hard path and hit every speed bump and feel challenged and then overcome and what have you. If you are a sensitive individual, do not take the challenging path, but navigate through, your personal needs and personal touches along the way.
And
If
don't expect it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
no, no,
interrupt.
no, no, you're good.
Don't expect it to be perfect, even if you are on the right path. If you have felt it in your bones from birth that you want to be a doctor, and you are in pre-med and you're in med school, and you're working so hard, which that's a horribly suffering time. That's brutal. It's not going to be easy, but you have an outcome, a desired outcome in mind. So you can run the gauntlet to get there and be successful. One of the doctors I used to work for when I did front office work said, "Do you know what they call the guy who graduated at the bottom of the class in med school? Doctor." I mean,
I was waiting for like a really profound answer.
no, they call him doctor. And so, some things and some goals are hard, and that might be your right path, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And even if it is somewhat easy, you're living the dream. That old adage of if you're doing something you love, you'll never work a day in your life is a lie.
It's such a lie.
Because even if you're doing something you love, there are going to be days you're just tired.
Yeah.
You're just not feeling it. I don't want to do something even that feels good for 24, 26 hours, So much less something that's hard work. So even if you're doing the right thing and you're on the right path, there's still going to be days of struggle. But overall, when you look at your aggregate trajectory of the last many weeks, how much resistance are you getting? Because when you're getting resistance to what you're trying to do, you need to stop and redirect. Just like a GPS, make a U-turn, go back to the last time things felt okay, and recalibrate your path. Because if it's consistently difficult, you got off path somehow.
Right. And I'm so glad you said that, because that's usually one of the navigation things is first the question comes, am I on the right path? And then the question of what do I want? And then, they may say something like, peace. And I'm like, okay, well, when's the last time you felt peaceful? Oh, well, I was doing X, Y, and Z and I felt this. And okay, well, let's talk about all the places that may be missing. And it usually revolves around work and relationships and how those got off track. And have you outgrown the people? Have you outgrown the workplace? Um have you sold yourself short in a venture for something else? Are you playing it safe? And are you no longer challenged, and then going from there? So definitely diving into when is the last time you had that peace. And what's interesting sometimes is that people will realize that they never had what they're asking for. And so that's the missing piece, is that they don't know what to ask for. So they heard their favorite podcaster or YouTuber say, this is what I have and you should want it too. One of the reasons I don't like sharing my process and what I go through, because I don't want people to feel like this is the only way. I much rather hear about how you did it and how you overcame it, because it adds to the collective possibilities and tools that we have available. But know that my version of peace is not going to be the same as yours. I've had that
Mhm.
conversation time and again. My peace is absolute silence, zero interaction for at least 24 to 48 hours, and then coming back fresh. Um,
That was a brilliant thing that you said, and I really want to unpack that just a little bit to say that what's right for one person definitely is not right for the other, but also you might be on track at one time of your life doing one thing. That doesn't mean that that's forever.
oh, yes.
You can absolutely have things that are right at one time not be what's right at a different time. And so people tend to want to go back and recreate the past
Hmm.
because they felt a particular way with a particular person or doing a particular thing, and that
Hmm.
doesn't mean it's appropriate for you at that time. So we get that a lot with relationships of people
Yeah,
wanting to go back and reignite certain relationships when those relationships ended for a reason. They may have been there for a reason, but they also ended for a reason. And I think that it's really, we talk about, for instance, peace. People offer concepts for what they want in their lives. They
right.
won't say, I want a job that I love, that I feel productive and appreciated and well compensated. I want a partner who's an equal partner, who has the same values that I do. They don't go that far. They say, I want to be happy. And
Yeah,
happy is such a big umbrella of a word that if one thing is going on that makes you unhappy, suddenly the whole thing is just a wreck.
absolutely.
So thinking in those broad terms, which everybody does, is really not a productive way to manifest what you want in your life.
I'm here trying to pull up it there. I think I brought this up last time. The movie Hector in the Search for Happiness. It was a UK film where this therapist figures out that he's not creating change in the life of his patients and he wants to go out and find happiness. And I keep going back to this movie like over the last month. It's just been in my head and almost to the point of wanting to take notes. I think I even said that last time. Because like Katrina said, happiness is such a broad term. For the person who is happiest with their family, that's not going to be the same as the person who feels happiest when they're being productive. Virgo. So it's a different scope, it's a different scale, and it's not to say that one is better than the other, but can those people find union together, or can they identify with one another? Yeah, the productive person can say, okay, when I'm doing things for my family, I feel happy. The family person is going to say, well, I just need to be around them, I just need them with me. However, I can see where bringing things home has value. So, diving into the details of your personal experience is the key to, am I on the right path? And that personal dive, I think there's a bit of shame and guilt around that as well. To say, you know, is it if is it okay that I don't want this much, or is it okay that I want more? And circling those and trying to get a handle on those things. It can be a dicey journey. And to Katrina's point of going back to what you had before, I think that this circles us back to grief. I have a
Mhm.
lot of folks coming in to grieve the person that they used to be. And I often have to remind them that that person probably couldn't handle what was happening to
Yes,
them right now.
very wise. Yes.
And so there's a point at which you can go back and get pieces, maybe even hold ceremony to say, I'm grateful for you, I'm grateful for what you did for me back then
Mhm.
and what I've learned, and to bring those tools forward. But we don't go backward in time. You don't go back to your 5-year-old self expecting them to know how to serve your family, because they will not. In fact, they'll break down and be like, no, me first, you know. Um, so we're circling right back around to the beginning of this conversation around grief and finding balance with loss, spiritual growth, and following the path that you're on, understanding that it's even just right for the hour that you have, and that the next moment you have an opportunity to make a different decision. So,
I really, man, I can't say any better than that. That's very, very true. And I think that for each person, it's really important that you stop and take inventory from time to time. We get so involved with day-to-day life that we don't really look at our lives to see, am I getting the reward back for the energy I'm putting into this person or this situation? And so it's important to take those timeouts you were talking about, 24, 48 hours where you're unplugged, you're alone, you're not getting impressions from anybody else. You're not seeing your friends, you're not even, maybe not even seeing your partner. You're just alone with your thoughts to see what's feeding me right now
mm-hmm,
and what's draining me right now, and to make those nips and tucks in such a way that you're really going to Marie Kondo your life, so that if it's not bringing you joy, if it's not feeding you, that you're reestablishing the dancing distance
yep.
and limiting your involvement.
And be prepared for the discomfort. It's going to come. It's why people don't take the time. It's because it's uncomfortable. Once you find out that what was feeding you is a whole lot of nonsense, that it's empty calories. All you've been doing is eating hot dogs and French fries this whole time instead of getting a home cooked meal.
Yep. It's going to be feeding you, or it's going to be eating you. One
Yeah.
of the other.
And prepare for the guilt and the feeling of selfishness, but you need that. You need that every now
Yep.
and then.
And prepare for people who have been taking advantage of your inattention
Hmm.
to be really pissed when you cut off the gravy train.
Yep. How dare you? How
Yep.
dare you care about yourself more than
That's
me?
right.
Mm-mm-mm. Oh my goodness. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. I know that we have so much more to say. Our comments have been active, and I love how we've cross pollinated
Yes.
communities, because you guys can see each other, you can experience each other in the chat, and we hope to see more comments as folks are watching this on the replay. I think we've got a good system going. I think we're going to stick with this. And I'm so happy to see the folks that have joined us. And if you are having your experiences, if you want to reach out, Katrina and I both talked about processing our personal challenges and holding space for others. um, but as you've heard, we're finding balance in that. We hope you are too. We are both, because we operate in that capacity. I hate to voluntold Katrina, but I'm sure she's on board. Like, if you need to reach out and just have space held for you, we both have appointments available for that. Not that
Mhm.
that's what this is for, but you know that we are a community, and that's why we say things like in our community, because this platform is our community, you guys are our community, and then East and West Coast individually as well. So we'd love to hear more from you. We hope that this broadcast has served you well this evening. Um, and I think we will put this, like I say, back in the fridge until next week. So for all of that, I'm going to end us here and say good night. And
Night.
until next time, bye, guys.
Bye.